Happy New Year! I cut my hair. I feel like have I shown that online yet? I think I have on Instagram, but I think that's it. I don't think I've actually done a podcast episode before with it. It is almost the new year. It is New Year's Eve when this episode is coming out, and I'm actually only recording this the day before, so it kind of already feels like New Year's Eve in a way. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know where this episode is going to go right away, because the topic of the episode that I had written down was how to start 2025 off on the right foot. And here I am thinking, wow, I have no idea what the answer to that is. So we're gonna work through it together, and we're gonna figure it out together. Every year I write myself a letter on the new year, kind of just going through the year, talking about what happened, what I improved in, what I want to improve in, all of these different things. And I don't have the letter with me right now because I am very strict with myself that I cannot open it until New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. And I'm recording this on the 30th, so I'm not allowed to open it yet. But I do write myself a letter every year, and that's kind of what I'm going to do in this episode, is as if I was almost writing that letter now and kind of thinking about what is it that I want to write in my letter. So I think back in the year and I think of, oh boy, what was January even like? I had just finished my first semester of sophomore year. And I think there was a lot of self-discovery. And this year, I think there was a lot to do with just trying to figure out who in the world I was. There was a lot still kind of changing at the time, and I really had to think about, like, okay, what, like, you know, like all of these external things I think kind of defined me in the past, and how do I define myself based on who I am, right? Like who I actually am, and without all of those external things. And so I was doing a lot of finding myself, and in that I think a lot of it had to do with finding my style. So how I presented myself, things like how I dress, the type of clothes that I'm comfortable in, right? If I go out and I'm in clothes that I'm not comfortable in, like my whole like being is just uncomfy all day. I need to be in clothes that I feel comfortable in, that I feel myself in. And I did a lot of exploring what that meant for me at the time. And I feel like that was the majority of that entire spring semester for me, was figuring out who even am I and what do all of these different things mean to me. So I think that was a little bit of kind of Q1 there. And then it got to really struggling with my mental health a little bit. It wasn't crazy, but it was just that there was so much going on, you guys. There was so much going on. I was apartment hunting. I was getting diagnosed with OCD, which, fun fact, I do not have OCD. That was a misdiagnosis. Apparently, I have minor ADHD. So that was fun to explore that. I'll get on more of that later if I remember. But I went through that entire process of just dealing with a lot of different things. I had kind of started a few different medications. I was dealing with just my body getting used to the medications that I was on, and my body getting used to what is life without having all of these struggles that I was used to having. So this is the first time, like the first time in years. Almost, 5 years. 5 years. That was the first time in 5 years that I had a part of my life where I wasn't, like, I was able to live without struggling with health issues. And that was amazing. And it was also kind of terrifying to figure out, like, what does this even mean for me? So then we get into this summer, and guess what? A health issue does come along. I got my gallbladder out. That was a whole thing, because the big thing for me with surgeries is the mental toll. I mean, the mental and physical toll, but I was not prepared for the mental toll that it took on me afterwards, and the physical toll, because apparently the medication that they gave me, I do not metabolize correctly. So I was just on no medication. It didn't do anything. Waking up from surgery on no medication is not fun. I will tell you guys that. It was a whole process. I was getting, settled into the apartment, settled into the job that I was working. And then my life kind of, for about a month or two got turned upside down, because I got my gallbladder out, and it was supposed to take only a little while for me to recover, and it took way longer because of different complications that I had. So that was the summer. The summer was really just like, I am just doing my best to get through. I was so excited for classes to start, because I was so ready to have a routine and to not really have to, I needed a change. So then the semester started, and this semester was a lot more of settling in, a lot more of realizing what it is that I want in the long term, or beginning to think about that. It was my junior year. I was figuring out where do I see myself after college? Where do I see all of that? Preparing for next semester, figuring out what does any of this mean to me, and also figuring out how to take care of myself while also making sure that I am doing things like my classes and working and being productive, and how do I do all of that. And then that was when I found out that I had ADHD instead, and going through that process of figuring out okay, what does this mean for me? And honestly, I've gotten to a point where I understand myself a lot better, because I understand that the way that I am always doing things is part of maybe some hyperactivity there, and I channel that through constantly doing things. And I also have realized that finding this out doesn't change anything. I have such a mild case of it that I don't need to be on medication, at least right now. So it really doesn't change anything, except that I now understand maybe why I have some of the thought processes or the feelings that I do. The feeling of sometimes it's a little bit hard to relax, or I feel like I need to be super productive, or the feeling of hyper focusing on things and almost getting to a point where it's paralyzing for me to even do anything. Decision making, I understand why that's so hard for me now too. That's fun. So all these different things of do I want to label myself in terms of mental health? I've never really liked to before. I never really liked to label myself at all when it comes to my health, because it doesn't need to be a life sentence, right? And sometimes by labeling, I think that it is a life sentence, or that somehow changes who I am by having a label. And that's not my goal with this. My goal is to just use it to understand, okay, maybe that's why some of the behaviors happen. And instead of being harsh on myself and being why do you do this? Why do you hyper focus on things so much? To be hey, that's just part of who I am. It's my nature. I do it. And what can I do to make it less paralyzing or stressful for me, right? To continue to move forward, and somehow understanding your mental health is what allows you to be able to figure out how to work with it, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean a diagnosis is just a way that us as humans have tried to put a label onto something that sometimes we don't even completely understand. And for me, I carry so much weight with labels, and I've really learned that that's not That's not what needs to happen. The label doesn't change who I am in any way, shape, or form. It just changes maybe the way that I understand myself or the way that I treat myself. I maybe am a little less harsh on myself now that I understand, hey, this is just part of, like, there's a reason why, right? Like, it makes sense to me. I feel like I understand myself a lot more. So overall, I think the year was a lot of really getting to know myself and understand this like new era of who I am. Like I said, I feel like this is the first time in 5 years, which when you're 20 feels almost like your entire life, right? That I have really been able to live without the past still holding me back in a way. So what I mean by that is 2019, I was dealing with PANDAS disorder, right? And I was also just in that teenage like years of just trying to figure out who I am. And 2020, COVID hit. We were all a little lost during that time, more than just a little. And I was still struggling with PANDAS disorder for a little bit of that. And then 2021, I was just barely out of it. Barely, like, my brain, I was in so much therapy, you guys. I was going every single week to a huge hospital to do in-depth therapy because my brain, like, I didn't know, I had no concept of what being a, I don't want to say this, but for lack of better words, normal teenager was. Or I didn't have any idea as to how to exist the way that I had before, right? My brain was so confused what was next. And it was all just this giant mess in my brain. And I had no idea what was next. 2022, I graduated from high school and I barely started to feel like I had a little bit of a grasp on, like, I was really starting to discover myself then. Really just questioning everything about who I am, what I believe, every single thing. 2023, I was in a toxic relationship that kind of took over my entire mental health. I was also dealing with undiagnosed or untreated PMDD, and the two of those things together, I felt like I took a million steps backwards. And 2023 at the very end, all of that changed. I got out of the relationship, I got on medication, and I started to feel like I could breathe again for the first time. And honestly, since I had PANDAS. And then 2024, I feel like, was that year of figuring out how to breathe again, of realizing, okay, PANDAS is something in the past for me now. I no longer have flashbacks to it. I no longer have nightmares about it. I have built a life beyond it, and it has been incredible. Finding myself, I feel like I have so much more of a grasp on who I am today than I did before. And that just comes with age, partly. And that also is something that will continue to change my entire life, right? I don't think we can truly know who we are all the time. But it did have a big impact on that. I feel like there was a shift there where I was starting to realize, okay, who am I actually, rather than how can I try to be something that I'm not? And I was still recovering from this relationship. And I still am. I still struggle with it. And there are still things in my life that I struggle with, right? Honestly, I was kind of having a hard time actually sitting down to do this episode because there is something going on right now that I've been struggling with, and I didn't have the motivation to sit down and do this, but I decided it's time, and I do want to. And I think that what I've learned this year overall is that life will always have things to throw at you. Life will always have things to throw at you, things to bring you down, but it'll also always have things to be grateful for. And in the end, what I kept coming back to this year was, I just want to slow down and settle into who I am and settle into myself, because I don't think I really got a chance to ever slow down and settle into who I was until this year. And it shocks me how I never feel like I had that. But I didn't. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of what your 20s are all about. I mean, you are starting to become more independent. You are out of high school, which is just a whirlwind of trying to figure out who you are. And it's a time when you're kind of starting to maybe settle down a little bit in a way. It doesn't necessarily mean settle down into one city, one place, one job, but maybe it's settle down into yourself. You're starting to figure out, okay, who am I and how can I really truly be comfortable with that? How can I really embrace that? To me, that's what your 20s are. That's why it is this huge time of your life that you are exploring more about who you are still, but in a different way than you did in high school, if that makes sense. In a more mature way. I mean, your 20s altogether are just, I mean, your prefrontal cortex develops it when you're about 25. I thought that might actually be later, but that's for another time. You are in college or out of high school, and then you are figuring out what you want to do maybe in the long term. You may be thinking about that a little bit more. You are working, you are traveling maybe, you are like, there's so many different things. You're meeting new people, you're maybe finding people that are a little bit more of your forever people. It's a time of change. But I feel like that change, at least for me this year, really, it was a slow change. A change where I didn't feel like I needed to rush it. I felt like I was going to sit back and do my best to relax and see what life was going to bring me. That to me is what I've learned in 2024, and that is what I want to live out in 2025. I want to live out that peaceful relaxation, that life where I'm no longer pushing myself beyond what I can do. I'm no longer pushing myself to be the best. I am only truly, I'm only pushing myself to be me. That is my goal for 2025. And that, I think, is how you start off the new year on the right foot, is to really think about, what is it that I learned in the last year? What is it that I've been living in? What phase am I in my life right now? And where do I see myself at the end of next year? And honestly, that question, I don't even know where I see myself at the end of next year. But I think I see myself doing my best to take it slow, to be easy on myself, and to really settle into a life that I'm absolutely in love with. And to really settle into that and build it in a way that's a little bit more of a long-term thing, right? I'll be in my senior year of college at the time and thinking about what's next. And I think that's what 2025 is for thinking about what is to come and thinking about how I can just continue to get to know myself, continue to get to be who I am and find the things that bring me joy and slow down a little. I think that's been the theme this year. It's time to slow down. And that doesn't mean slow down with anything maybe that you see online, but slow down mentally. I think my mind has been going a million miles per hour for the last 5 years. And I think it's time for me to learn, or to start making an effort at figuring out, what can I do to slow down, to relax a little, and to maybe take some of that weight off of me. Because at the time, that's what I needed, but I don't think it's what I need anymore. I think I'm in a place where I want to slow down, and I want to be able to honor that in myself. That's where I'm at. It's a whole deep thing, but I think that's really what the new year is for. And I think, there's nothing inherently different about one year versus another, but it's this time that is easy to measure, and it's an easy time to just be like, hey, you know what? Now. Like, if you're looking for a sign, if you're looking for a right time, the new year is that time to maybe just sit and think about what's next, where am I at, what did I learn? Sometimes it's hard to sit down and do that, and I think that that's part of why we love to celebrate the new year, because it's a way to somehow mentally separate in our brain era to era, year to year, and how we are changing, and how to honor that in ourselves. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful new year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year's Eve, I guess. And I will see you guys in 2025.